If Malcolm Reed hadn't seen that child that day, perhaps he would have continued living as a lonely success and never known that he had abandoned his own daughter, the one with the exact same eyes for 8 years. The city, when viewed from the 42nd floor, always looked peaceful to the point of being fake. Malcolm knew this better than anyone. As one of the rare black CEOs ever listed in the 50 most powerful people in humanitarian tech, he had learned an important lesson: the higher you climb, the colder the wind, and the fewer people actually see who you really are. That afternoon, he only meant to take a walk around the old neighborhood, the place he had lived during his college years, to look for some inspiration for his new meal aid program. A plain gray hoodie, old jeans, cheap sunglasses. No one recognized the man who had once spoken at MIT and signed $100 million contracts with the government. And precisely because no one recognized him, no one paid attention when he suddenly stopped, frozen in the middle of the hurried crowd, a child, curled up beneath the awning of a sidewalk shop, her head resting against a wet trash bag, the torn t-shirt slipping off one shoulder to reveal sun-darkened skin and skinny legs like twigs. Malcolm bent down. The girl wasn't asleep. She was unconscious. "Where are this kid's parents?" he whispered, almost just to himself. No answer. No one stopped. Only the wind shifted the plastic tarp slightly aside, revealing a dirty face and the eyes. When her eyelids parted slightly, Malcolm saw it clearly. Deep blue, clear, cold. A color of eyes incredibly rare for people of color, and exactly the same as his. He immediately picked her up. Her body was as light as an empty backpack. His heart pounded unnaturally hard. No way. It has to be a coincidence. But what if it's not? A nearby eatery, a small Mexican-style diner, showed no reaction when he walked in. Setting the girl down on a wooden chair, he signaled to the owner, "Give me everything that's soft, easy to eat, and some warm water." The girl sat still, eyes closed, lips cracked, nose scratched in places. But when Malcolm used a tissue to gently wipe the dust from her forehead, her eyes suddenly opened with alertness. I don't have money." Her voice was hoarse. "I'm not asking you for anything, either." Malcolm smiled. "Then let's just say it's my treat. Lunch with a kind stranger." She slowly picked up the spoon, eating tiny bites as if afraid someone might snatch it away. He didn't ask her name right away, but when her sleeve slipped down as she reached for a piece of bread, Malcolm froze. A birthmark, shaped like a pair of outstretched wings, on her left upper arm. Exactly like the one his grandmother had once said was passed down from your great-grandfather. His heart clenched. If the blue eyes were a coincidence, then what is this? "Where do you live?" he asked, trying to keep his voice even. She paused for a second, then pointed out the window. "Last row of rental rooms in Alley 7. Room 14. I live with my mom." Malcolm pretended to be indifferent, but inside, every cell in his body was screaming. That alley, that room number, painfully familiar. He used to drive Lena, the only ex-girlfriend he had ever thought of marrying, there every weekend night. They had parted without a word, sudden, cold, and Malcolm had never forgiven her for vanishing like the wind. No way. It can't be Lena. "Thank you. Mister, I'm full now." The girl bowed her head. "My mom will scold me if I talk to strangers." Her words jolted him. "What's your name?" She turned back and gave a small smile. "Ava," almost instinctively. Malcolm took a step back. That name, Ava, was the very name he once wanted to give his future daughter with Lena. He had written it on the whiteboard in his office, then erased it, then written it again. The girl waved and walked out of the diner. Malcolm paid the bill and stood up, not out of curiosity, no longer out of doubt. It was instinct. He followed Ava like a harmless stranger, through several alleys, past an old parking lot, past an abandoned laundromat. Room 14 appeared before him. Peeling walls, an old wooden door with a paper note stuck on it warning power will be cut if payment is not made. The girl pulled a small key from her shoe, opened the door, and closed it behind her. Malcolm hid behind a streetlight pole, his heart beating faster than ever. 1 minute, 2 minutes, then the door opened. A woman stepped out, hair tied hastily, wearing an old t-shirt, holding a garbage bag. She glanced around, about to turn back in, when their eyes met. Malcolm froze. It was Lena, still the same radiant brown skin, the same misty gray eyes, but now aged, wary. Her eyes widened, a brief moment of shock, then immediately, Lena slammed the door shut. Malcolm rushed to the door, knocked, no reply. He breathed heavily, fists clenched, one question echoing in his chest. She hid from me. Hid a child. All these years, and the answer, it seemed, was just behind that door. But before Malcolm could knock again, a soft click was heard. The lock had been latched shut. The door before Malcolm remained still, as if it had never opened. No footsteps, no voices, not even the faintest breath leaking through the faded old wood. He stood there in silence for several minutes, his hand still resting on the door, as if with enough time, the past would unlock itself like an unfinished book waiting to be read. But it didn't open, and Lena did not come out. Malcolm turned to leave, but his mind couldn't pull away from room 14. He quietly returned to his penthouse, where everything was refined, from the lighting to the scent of diffused perfume in the air, but nothing could ease the emptiness spreading in his chest. If that was Ava, and if Lena never left me by choice, then these 8 years, I've been living inside a lie I once believed to be true. He didn't sleep all night. Malcolm sat before a blank screen, with only one line blinking in the search bar: DNA test. He didn't press search. He just typed, then erased. At 7 a.m. the next morning, Malcolm returned to the rental complex. He sat in his car, parked 2 doors down from room 14. The sleek black SUV looked like a foreign object amid the dull gray walls, but no one paid attention. At 10 to 8, Ava opened the door. A backpack on her shoulders, oversized coat, hesitant steps. Malcolm didn't approach. He simply watched. A woman followed behind her, handing the girl a plastic lunchbox. Her eyes were still ringed with dark circles, her hair loosely tied, her shoulders trembling as if another sleepless night had passed. Lena. She didn't see him, but Ava did. The girl turned back and gave the faintest smile. No words of greeting, but her eyes said everything she had recognized him. That little girl, she's not a stranger to my silhouette. Malcolm stepped out of the car, walking in the opposite direction to avoid suspicion. But he didn't go far. He waited. It was Monday, which meant Lena would have her morning shift. At exactly 8:30, Lena left the house, carrying an old handbag, a fabric hat on her head, and walked briskly toward a small eatery 2 blocks away. Malcolm followed from a distance far enough not to be noticed, but close enough to catch every lowered gaze, every weary breath. She entered a small, humble buffet-style diner. Malcolm had passed by this place 100 times, never once noticing the person washing dishes in the back. He walked in after her and took a seat in a corner booth. 15 minutes later, a door behind the bar swung open. Lena appeared, carrying a tub full of dirty glasses. Her hands, red and swollen, lifted to wipe away the sweat on her brow. Someone shouted from the kitchen. She nodded silently, said nothing, and returned to her task. She always stayed silent, even when stepped on. Malcolm stood up and walked to the counter. But he didn't call out to Lena. He simply asked the owner, "How long has she been working here? Almost 8 years. Hardworking, quiet. Why, you know her. She just looks familiar. Thank you." He turned away, heart pounding wildly. 8 years, that meant she had Ava, and then started working here. No one beside her, no message ever sent to him. That night, Malcolm wrote a letter, not long, no explanations. If you're willing to listen, Come to Brown's Cafe tomorrow at 4 p.m. No one else, just me. And a memory that never got its ending. At midnight, he slid the letter under the door of room 14. No reply expected, not knowing if she would even read it. 4 p.m. the next day. Brown's coffee wasn't fancy. It was the old cafe where he and Lena once spent hours sharing a single brownie and a cup of tea. No Wi-Fi. No background music, only the gentle clink of spoons tapping against glass. Malcolm sat at the back table, facing the door. 4:05. No one came. 4:15. Still no one. Just as he was about to stand, a figure stepped in. Not Lena. It was Ava. She looked around shyly. When she spotted Malcolm, she slowly walked over to the table. Mom said, "She didn't know if she should come, but I told her she should, because you're the only person she ever looked at." Without anger, Malcolm leaned down, gently asking, "And did your mom say anything about me?" Ava shook her head. "She doesn't like talking about the past. She just said, if you're still the same good man from before, you wouldn't be mad at her." Malcolm gave a sad smile. "Do you know where that birthmark on your arm came from?" Ava shook her head again. "You look like your mom, but your eyes, and that birthmark, they're from your father." He paused. "Have you ever asked your mom about your dad?" The girl nodded. She said, "He used to be a good man, but then he went far away and never came back." Malcolm felt something crack inside his chest. Ava hesitated, then pulled something from her backpack, a drawing, a hand-drawn picture of a man in a suit holding hands with a little girl. Standing in front of a bakery, in the corner, written in clumsy letters, "Dad, if I ever meet you, I'll know it's you." That sentence wasn't written by Ava. It was Lena's handwriting. The cafe door creaked open. Malcolm looked up, and this time, it was Lena. No makeup, no words. She just stood there, looking at him. And Ava, sitting in between. A moment of silence, a world of silence. This time, she came. Lena stood right at the entrance of the cafe, the late afternoon light casting a pale golden hue on her loosely tied hair. Malcolm didn't take his eyes off her. He had always imagined that if he ever saw her again, he would ask 100 questions, demand an explanation, pour out every bit of pain she had left behind. But at this moment, all he could do was stand up. Lena walked toward him slowly. She didn't avoid his gaze, but she showed no emotion either. Ava looked from her mother to Malcolm, her eyes wide, as if caught between two maps and unsure which one led home. "I'll wait outside," Ava said, her voice as light as a leaf. She didn't wait for anyone to agree. She simply stood, walked out of the cafe, and left the two adults facing each other in breathless silence. Lena sat down. She didn't remove her coat, didn't order anything. Her hands were clasped tightly together, her palms trembling faintly, but her eyes remained steady. "You still look the same," she said at first. No bitterness, no jest. "And you," Malcolm began, "look like you never disappeared." Lena pressed her lips together gently. "I never disappeared." A moment passed, quietly, suspended. Malcolm exhaled, leaning forward slightly. "Then why?" "Lena, you vanished without a word. I searched for you everywhere. You didn't answer texts, didn't pick up my calls, and then you were gone. Like you never existed." Lena let out a soft laugh, a laugh that held no joy. "You think I had a choice?" Malcolm clenched his fists. "What do you mean?" Lena lifted her gaze, eyes glistening but firm. "That day, when you went to the airport for that overseas project, I went to your house." Malcolm's eyes widened. "But my mother said—" "Yes." Lena nodded without hesitation. "It was your mother who opened the door." The story began to shift, and it was no longer the story he once believed. She invited me in, had me sit, poured tea, then placed an envelope in front of me. Lena paused, her gaze distant. Inside was a check. $250,000. Malcolm stared, stunned. "What?" "And an offer," she said. "No, an order. I was to leave you, immediately, If not, she'd make sure my whole family lost their jobs, and maybe even get us sued for exploiting a personal relationship with the heir. Malcolm was speechless. You never told me. Would you have believed me? Lena cut in, her voice icy. Back then, you believed I betrayed you. I tried to send a letter. I wrote everything and went to your house. But she blocked it all. Malcolm had no words left. His heart felt like it was being pierced by 1,000 tiny needles. You spent 10 years living in a misunderstanding and never once questioned the person who had the power to orchestrate everything. I didn't take the money, Lena continued. I just disappeared. I rented a room as far away as I could, took any job I could get to raise Ava. Ava? Malcolm murmured. That name. It was the name I once wanted to give your future daughter. Lena finished. I know. She remembered. Every detail. You can hate me, Malcolm said, fists clenched, guilt in his eyes. But Ava, she's my daughter. You had no right to keep her from me. Do you think... I never wanted to tell you, Lena gave a sad smile. Every time Ava got sick, I wanted to pick up the phone, but I didn't have your number, no contacts, no way to reach you, because your mother erased every trace of me. Malcolm bowed his head. Every word she said landed like a heavy stone in his heart. I never once doubted my mother, he whispered. I thought you had someone else, that you left for money. Lena looked at him, silently. And that look alone, was what shattered all the anger inside him. Because in her eyes, there was no hatred, only sadness, stretched across 8 long years. No one wins when both stay silent for too long. They sat in silence for a long while. Finally, Lena spoke. I don't need anything from you. No money, no support. Ava is fine. Malcolm looked up. But I'm not. She looked at him, confused. I've missed 8 years of her life. I don't know her birthdays. I've never heard her call me Dad. I didn't see her take her first steps. Maybe you're strong enough. But I'm not. I can't pretend she's not my daughter. A flicker of emotion passed through Lena's eyes. She turned away, hiding the softness threatening to show. Ava? Does she know? Malcolm asked. Lena shook her head. She only knows her father was once a good man. And then... he disappeared. Malcolm gave a bitter smile. Then it's time. For me to make it right. The cafe door opened. Ava walked in, holding a small, old camera. A toy Malcolm had once given Lena when they were newly in love. I found this in an old shoebox, Ava said, handing it to him. Mom said, it doesn't work anymore. Malcolm took it gently. He opened the battery compartment. Inside, a memory card, untouched, never used. Malcolm stared at the memory card in his hand as if it were a door that had been sealed for 8 long years. He turned it slowly between his fingers, as though weighing whether he was ready to face whatever lay inside. Do you remember this? Lena asked, her voice hoarse and low. Malcolm nodded. Vintage-style film camera. Your 25th birthday gift. At the time. You said, capture every moment, so one day we can tell our child the story. Lena gave a faint smile, her voice tightening. So I did. During Ava's first year, I took pictures of everything. Her crying, her first smile. I don't know why I kept the memory card. Maybe I was still hoping. Malcolm slowly slipped the memory card into the inside pocket of his jacket. He didn't say thank you. He didn't say I'm sorry. He didn't say I regret everything. Those words were too small against the weight of lost time. Lena didn't expect him to say anything, but Ava still stood nearby, her quiet, deep blue eyes watching them, a silent witness to the truth. I want ice cream, Ava suddenly said. Both Malcolm and Lena froze. Right now, the girl insisted. With Mom, and with you. Lena pressed her lips together. Ava. You shouldn't pressure. I'm not pressuring, I'm suggesting, the girl replied frankly, because I think Mom needs ice cream, and so do you, sometimes. Reconciliation begins with a single scoop of vanilla. They sat at a small ice cream shop on the corner, once an old bookstore Malcolm and Lena used to frequent. Now it was painted in pastel colors, lined with wooden benches and a hand-drawn menu board. Ava sat between the two adults, tapping her spoon gently against her cup, eyes sparkling as if this were just another normal day. "Do you like coconut flavor?" she asked. Malcolm nodded. "It used to be my favorite, same as Mom." Ava grinned. "Guess you got a bit of both of us," Malcolm said softly. A simple sentence, but it made Lena turn her face away. Malcolm looked at her. The breeze caught her hair. That scent is still the same jasmine mixed with kitchen smoke. Still the woman who had once been his whole youth, but now she had carried the weight of both their youths. Not everyone walks away from a wound whole enough to forgive. Back at the small rental room, Malcolm didn't rush to leave. He paused at the door, waiting as Lena unlocked it, then hesitated before saying, "I want a chance to make things right." Lena turned to him, her gaze calm, yet impossibly deep. "And how will you make it right? With money. By dragging us out of the slums, just to throw her into a world that doesn't feel like hers, no." Malcolm shook his head gently. "By staying." A silence fell between them. Lena looked at him for so long that Malcolm thought she was going to refuse, but then she nodded barely, quietly. Not the kind of nod meant for a lover, not one meant for an enemy, but the kind you give to someone who is and will always be part of a memory too real to deny. Forgiveness doesn't happen in one night, but sometimes it starts with a door left unlocked. That night, Malcolm returned to his penthouse, once a symbol of self-made freedom, now just a finely crafted glass cage for an expensive kind of loneliness. He slid the memory card into his laptop. The first photo appeared a newborn wrapped in blankets. Eyes still closed, tiny hand wrapped tightly around someone's finger, Lena's. The second 4-month-old Ava, lying in a small, worn-down room, a superhero printed bedsheet under her, one photo at a time. Malcolm watched them, slowly, as if trying to swallow every moment time had stolen. Ava wobbled as she took her first steps. Ava falling face first, Ava sobbing from a fever, and then a screenshot. A message Lena had written, but never sent today, Ava, said Dad. "I wanted you to hear it first." Among all the photos, one caught his breath. A photo of the envelope he had once sent Lena, still sealed, unopened. She had kept it. For 8 years. Malcolm lowered his head to the table. Not in anger, but in sorrow. A sorrow so full of love. It hurt. He no longer cared why she never wrote back, or why she never opened the letter. He only knew one thing now: the past couldn't be changed. But the future still could. The next morning, he canceled every meeting, put his investments on hold, told no one, not even his mother. He went to Ava's school. He stood outside the gate, watching through the bars of the playground. Ava was playing, laughing with a few other kids. Her eyes wandered and then stopped. She ran toward the gate, stopped right in front of him. "You really came." "I don't break promises," Malcolm said, correcting himself. "I mean, Dad doesn't break promises." Ava didn't say anything. Instead, she reached into her backpack and pulled out a piece of paper, a drawing. 3 people, Ava in the middle, Lena on the left, Malcolm on the right, and above them, a giant red heart with a scribbled caption, "My family." Saturday morning. Malcolm Reed, the CEO at the helm of the humanitarian empire Retech, stepped into the Reed family estate not as a dutiful son, but as a man standing on the edge between loyalty and defiance. The grand mansion perched atop the Westwood Hills looked just the same: trimmed palm trees, dark slate roof tiles, and marble busts guarding either side of the entrance. That house had once been the place Malcolm returned to every Thanksgiving, the place where he brought home his graduation certificate to show his mother. But today, it would be a battlefield. "Young Master Reed has returned," the butler bowed. But Malcolm said nothing. He walked straight into the grand hall, where his mother, Rosa Reed, was seated in a red silk-covered armchair, exuding the poise of a queen. "You really came back." Her voice was flat, emotionless. "I thought you'd continue your little street CEO game somewhere else." Malcolm didn't smile. He pulled out a chair across from her. "We need to talk. No small talk. No lectures. Rosa curled her lips. Then speak. You think I sabotaged your sweet first love? No. Malcolm looked her in the eye. I know you did. A second passed. No one spoke. Then Rosa gently set down her teacup. And if I did, you planned to blame me? To preserve the career you're now sitting atop? You didn't preserve anything. Malcolm replied coldly. You stole 8 years of fatherhood from me. You forced a single woman to live in poverty just to protect the Reed name from a rumor. Rosa tilted her head. You don't understand. Who was she? A maid with no home, no education, no background. If you had married her, our entire investment ecosystem would have collapsed. You had to lose her. And I did what you couldn't. No. Malcolm clenched his fists. I chose her. You were the one who refused to accept it. Rosa pulled out a stack of investigative documents from the drawer, all about Lena. Her mother had debts, her father had run away. And she once worked at a nightclub to pay for college. Here, Rosa said. You think I didn't know what kind of past she had? I knew everything. And I knew what would happen if the media dug that mess up. I stopped a scandal before it exploded. You didn't stop a scandal, Malcolm said quietly. You stopped me from being happy. Rosa suddenly stood up, eyes sharp as blades. Happiness, you think love is enough to survive in my world? You think she could become a real Mrs. Reed with nothing but teary eyes and a second-hand dress? What do you think I am, a pawn in your game of prestige? Rosa didn't answer. Her gaze said it all. Malcolm stepped closer. His voice didn't rise. But every word hit like a hammer. I'm not the boy you used to control. And I no longer see your protection as noble. You weren't protecting me. You were manipulating me. What do you want? Rosa asked. I want nothing from you, Malcolm replied. But I won't hide Lena and Ava anymore. They are my family. And if you want to cut me off from the Reed name, go ahead. But don't expect me to back down. An illegitimate child will not be accepted. She is not illegitimate, Malcolm said firmly. She is my daughter, and whether you acknowledge it or not, she carries both our blood. That evening, in Lena's small apartment, Malcolm quietly returned. Lena was sitting on the sofa. Ava, asleep in the bedroom, she asked. What did you say to her? Malcolm answered briefly. I told the truth, and I didn't ask for permission. Lena gave a faint smile. In her response, she didn't follow me. Malcolm looked at her, but she didn't stop me either. The next morning. When Lena opened the door, a sealed envelope was lying just outside. There was no note inside, only an old photo of Malcolm at 12 years old sitting on his mother's lap, holding a toy camera in his hands. Malcolm flipped the photo in his hand, staring at the careful handwriting on the back with an unreadable expression. Lena sat across from him, eyes still fixed on the envelope, as if it were an object sent from another world. Ava hadn't woken up yet, but the tiny apartment seemed to be holding its breath in a silence stretched tight like a drawn bowstring. What will she do? Lena asked softly. Malcolm placed the photo on the table. That's not the right question. Then what is? The question is, what has she already started doing just a few days later? The signs began to appear. First was an email from Ava's school. The girl had been transferred to a different class, without official explanation. The new homeroom teacher was someone Rosa had once fired from a community education program funded by Malcolm. Next was the building Lena rented. The landlord suddenly announced a rent increase. No paperwork, no negotiation. The reason, rising demand in the area. But Lena knew that area never had rising demand. The final blow came when RETEC's Community Health Network project, a partnership between Malcolm and the city government, was abruptly placed under internal investigation. The reason, conflict of personal interest. Malcolm understood. Rosa was tightening the grip. No noise, no declaration of war. Just a cold, calculated squeeze. Through power and influence. When a mother wants to protect her empire, even her own son is not an exception. Lena didn't know the whole story until Malcolm withdrew from a major conference, refused to speak, and declared a permanent leave of absence on national media. Speculation spread. People said he had health issues, burnout, or was preparing a leadership transition. But no one knew he was clearing the path to exit. You're giving up, Retech. Lena was stunned. No. Malcolm quietly closed his laptop. I'm stepping away from my mother's control. And everything you built, I'll rebuild it. From scratch. But this time, with you. And with Ava. Malcolm had secretly transferred all his shares in Retech to an independent trust in Ava's name. And Lena was the legal co-guardian. The entire city was shaken. The media exploded. CEO Malcolm Reed abruptly resigns. Transfers, entire stake to entity, named the Ava Foundation. No one knew who Ava was. Rosa did, and she was furious. That night, Rosa called. No greetings, no small talk. You've gone too far. No, Malcolm replied. I'm just getting started. You're going to destroy everything for one woman, no. Malcolm's voice was steel. I'm saving what little humanity I have left. Malcolm arranged for Lena and Ava to temporarily stay in another apartment safer, more private. But Lena hesitated. She didn't want to live in fear. She didn't want Ava growing up in a silent war between her grandmother and her parents. And then Ava spoke a sentence that left Malcolm frozen. If Grandma hates me, can I call her something else? Malcolm knelt down, looked into his daughter's eyes. She doesn't hate you. She just doesn't know how to love you yet. 1 week later, Malcolm received an email from Rosa. Not long, not sweet, just one line. If you've made your choice, I won't stop you, but don't expect me to watch you destroy yourself. Shortly after, a lawyer from Reed Holdings delivered a formal notice. Malcolm was permanently removed from managing any family-affiliated funds. All blood ties had been officially severed. The notice arrived at 7 a.m. No red stamp, no long-winded legal threats. Just a single closing sentence: Mr. Malcolm Reed will no longer be involved in any financial, executive, or inheritance-related activity within Reed Holdings as of today. That was Rosa's way of disowning him clean, elegant, and absolute. Malcolm looked at the document and set it down on the kitchen counter. Ava was having breakfast, scribbling something with crayons. Lena stood by the sink, looking up with questioning eyes. Is it her? She asked. Yes, Malcolm nodded. She did the last thing she could do. And now Lena asked no anger, no fear, only the calm of someone who had stood at the edge too many times to flinch anymore. Malcolm smiled faintly, but in his eyes was a weariness he had never shown before. Now, we begin, a simple sentence, but it marked the start of a new path, one without the crutches of a family empire, without the dazzling lights of conferences, without the shield of powerful business cards. Malcolm reached out to a few of his former colleagues, those who had stayed loyal, those who believed in the mission. Not the Reed name. They gathered at a small cafe. On a makeshift whiteboard, someone scribbled the new name for Ava, the Future Initiative, a name without Reed, but one with a reason to exist. The first project of For Ava was to sponsor 100 scholarships for young girls of color from underprivileged backgrounds like Ava. With only one requirement: no need to be brilliant, just don't give up. No interviews, no transcripts, no recommendation letters. Just a handwritten note from the child I want a chance to continue. No media coverage, no press releases. And yet the letters poured in like rain. Over 700 applications in just 3 weeks, among them. There was one letter, not from a child, but from a woman named Teresa M., a former assistant of Rosa's. She had been fired 6 years ago for refusing to intercept Lena's letters to Malcolm. You still have people who believe in you, Lena whispered after reading the letter. Even when you no longer believe in yourself. Malcolm gently squeezed her hand. And as for Ava, she didn't fully understand what was happening, but she knew one thing: Daddy could now pick her up after school. And for her, that one thing alone was enough to change her entire little world. One Saturday afternoon, Ava stood on stage receiving the most inspiring student award at school. Not because she had top grades, but because that little girl had written a sponsorship letter on behalf of a classmate who had lost their home. Under the gaze of the school board, Ava held the microphone and said, "My dad once told me, no grown-up is perfect, but if they're brave enough to say sorry, I'll forgive them." The auditorium fell silent. Then, a wave of applause erupted, not because Ava was smart, but because that little girl had said what adults often hide in silence. That sentence, unexpectedly, reached Rosa Reed. No one knew who had sent the short video clip to her, but when she opened it on her iPad in the study, her eyes froze at the words, "My dad." It was Malcolm, and Ava had called him Dad without a shred of hesitation. A week later, Lena received an unmarked package. Inside was an old pearl necklace, the kind Rosa used to wear along with a small card no one needs to know who it's from, as long as the little girl feels remembered. Arlena didn't give it to Ava. She simply stared at the necklace for a very long time. That evening, Ava suddenly said, "Mom, I want to invite Grandma to my play this weekend." Lena was taken aback. "You know she might not come, right? But if I don't invite her, then she'll definitely never come." Ava's eyes sparkled with quiet determination. So, Ava wrote a handwritten invitation. Malcolm held the card in his hand, hesitating, then silently drove to the Reed estate for the first time since being disowned. He stood at the front door, didn't ring the bell, just placed the card on the stone pedestal and walked away. The tiny card, with messy handwriting and a hand-drawn red heart, sat neatly on the marble step in front of Rosa Reed's estate. Once a symbol of power, now receiving an invitation from a child too young to know she was breaking an unspoken rule. Malcolm returned from his mother's mansion without expecting anything. He didn't tell Ava that he had delivered the card. Lena didn't ask. There are things grown-ups understand that sometimes. Silence is the only answer you'll get from someone not yet ready to let go of control. Saturday arrived faster than expected. Ava's school play was a small event, but to her, it was the biggest night of my life. She played the role of a flower blown away by the wind, then found her way back to the garden. "Daddy? Mommy? Did I do well?" Ava asked. Standing between the two adults in the audience as the applause faded. "You were amazing," Malcolm answered instantly. Lena smiled and gently patted her daughter's head. Ava looked around. "There's no surprise guest today," she said, trying to hide the tinge of disappointment in her voice. "That's okay." "Sweetheart," Lena whispered, "Mom and Dad are here." But Ava didn't answer. She only nodded, turned away, and Malcolm noticed her small shoulders droop just a little. No matter how strong a child may be, it's hard not to feel sad when the one person you were hoping for doesn't show up. That night, Ava went to bed earlier than usual. She was tired after a long, exciting day. Malcolm sat beside her, reading a page from a children's book, but his mind wasn't there. He was still thinking about Rosa, how she used to be the strongest person in his life, and now, the most distant. "Dad?" Ava spoke softly, eyes still closed. "Yeah, if I change my last name, will I become someone else?" Malcolm froze. "Why do you ask that?" "Because at school, my friend said, I don't have your last name. I told them it's okay. But I want to be like you, but I'm scared Mom will be sad." Malcolm gently squeezed her hand. "Your name doesn't change who you are, but if you want to choose, Mom and Dad will let you." The next day, Ava wrote her own request to change her surname from Carter to Reed. Her handwriting was clumsy, but firm. Malcolm didn't know who had told her how to do it. Lena said, "No one." She thought of it herself. A few days later, they went to the town hall to file the paperwork. The clerk looked at Ava, then at Malcolm, and smiled. "She has your eyes." Ava gripped Malcolm's hand tightly. "I want to be a Reed, not to be like Grandma, but to be like you." On the way home, Lena's phone rang. No name saved, she answered while walking. Squinting slightly at the street noise, a familiar voice came through deep, slow, "And as proud as ever, you let the girl change her name." Lena froze. Malcolm turned to her, noticing the shift in her expression. "It's your mother." Lena said, handing him the phone. Malcolm said nothing for the first 3 seconds. Then, calmly, I didn't ask for permission. I know, Rosa replied. And I also know I no longer have the right to object. She didn't ask where Malcolm was living. She didn't ask about Ava. She simply said one thing before hanging up. If the girl now carries the name Reed, then don't let her live to regret it. It wasn't a blessing, but it wasn't a rejection either. That weekend, Malcolm took Lena and Ava to visit a small house in the suburbs with a red-tiled roof, a spacious backyard, and an old pear tree casting shade. The house had been bought a week earlier, but Malcolm hadn't said a word until now. What is this? Lena asked, still holding their temporary luggage. A home, Malcolm said. If you say yes, Lena turned to Ava. Do you want to live here? Ava dashed inside, shouting, I have my own room, a window that looks at the tree, fireplace. Malcolm looked at Lena, eyes filled with hope. Lena didn't answer with words. She simply stepped forward and took his hand as if, after everything, she was finally ready to place hers in the hand of someone who once left her behind, together. The three of them hung a small wooden sign by the front door. It read, The Reed Family. Now. But as they stepped inside, Malcolm noticed an envelope placed on the table. There was no name, no sender. Inside was a photograph of Ava at her award ceremony and a small handwritten note, I didn't come. But I watched, and I'm proud. Malcolm folded the letter, his fingers lingering a little too long on the familiar handwriting. Rosa Reed, the woman who had once ruthlessly torn apart anything that didn't fit her value system, had finally written 3 words he had never heard from her lips in all his years. I'm proud. It wasn't an apology, but it was no longer silent. Ava didn't know who had sent the letter. She only saw her father step out into the yard, sit on the wooden chair beneath the pear tree, his eyes lit by a strange glow. Not joy, but release. You okay? Dad, Ava asked. Malcolm nodded. I think today is a special day. Is there cake? Ava scrunched her nose. Yes, Lena answered from the doorway. Chocolate almond. The old recipe your dad once borrowed from the Reed family chef when he was in college. So stealing a recipe can be the foundation of a happy family, Malcolm joked. Lena laughed. Ava didn't understand, but she laughed anyway. That night, in the warm house they had just moved into, there was no grand wedding, no lavish reception, no crowd of guests to offer congratulations. Just 3 people sitting together, sharing cake under soft golden light. And in that moment, a real family was formed not by blood, not by signatures, but by presence. The next morning, Malcolm received an email from an old reporter, someone who had once followed his career closely during his time at Retech. Can I get an exclusive interview? The For Ava project is making waves. People are calling you the CEO who gave up an empire for family. Any comment? Malcolm didn't respond right away. He looked over at the dining table, where Lena was brewing coffee. Ava was using scissors to cut paper for Christmas cards, and sunlight streamed in through the glass windows. He typed a short reply, no empire matters more than a home. In the months that followed, For Ava became one of the fastest-growing charitable foundations focused on supporting single mothers and children of color. No viral speeches, no trending hashtags, but every day, handwritten letters from the children they helped arrived, and to Malcolm. They were the greatest awards he'd ever received. One of them read, I don't know who my dad is, but I know you helped my mom buy back her bakery, and I think, if you were my dad, I'd be really happy. Malcolm pinned that letter to the refrigerator, right next to a photo of Ava. A quiet reminder that every time he chose to stay, he was doing the right thing. One late afternoon at year's end, a pale gray sky hung low over the old neighborhood, the very place where, 8 months ago, Malcolm had first knelt down and looked into the blue eyes that stopped his heart. That street corner was still there, unchanged. The diner, with its faded awning, still bore the same weathered sign, but next to it now stood something new, a small wooden table, steam rising from a kettle, a few jars of neatly arranged cookies, and a handwritten sign in careful, tidy script, free tea for anyone who needs a place to pause. Chelsea, once a single mother relying on charity meals, was now the one running this little refuge. She looked up, her eyes lighting up as she saw the three of them approaching. You really kept your word, she smiled. You brought her back to where it all began. Malcolm looked around, then replied slowly, but with quiet conviction, because sometimes the best things don't come from the brightest places. They come from where we were once forced to bow our heads. Ava gently tugged her mother's hand and whispered, Mom, I want to help pour tea with Miss Chelsea. Every Saturday. Lena looked at her daughter, then at Malcolm. He didn't speak. He just nodded, his eyes quieter than ever. Ava beamed and held out her hand for the teapot. Amid the rush of strangers passing by, that little girl stood behind the tea table like a tiny guardian of the simplest thing in the world, kindness. Malcolm placed a hand on his wife's back and softly said, Maybe. This is where our family starts again. Not with something grand, but with a cup of warm tea.